An AMV, or anime music video, is exactly what it sounds like. It's music with anime footage on top of it. You've probably seen this type of content before, you know, Dragon Ball fight scene footage on top of Linkin Park's In the End going together like it's peanut butter and jelly. Videos like these were absolutely everywhere in the early days of YouTube, especially in the form of, this is basically just piracy, but content ID doesn't exist yet, so if I put cool anime footage over it, it's totally fine, nice. Over time, though, people began to innovate more with the concept, introducing things like proper editing and video effects, and eventually this branched down to a bunch of subcultures of content. You know, the likes, YouTube poops, animator channels, web series, you get the idea. Especially for someone in my age range, it's easy to make the logical assumption that AMVs resulted from early YouTube culture, and early YouTube culture resulted from AMVs. And, like, given just that evidence, that's a pretty fair assumption. Allow me to throw a wrench into that. Actually, three. 3 wrenches into that. Welcome to Curiosities! Hey again, I'm D-Starlight, and as it turns out, the concept of an AMV, even if not in name, has existed for way longer than you or I probably realize. In fact, in my never-ending quench for obscure and artsy OVAs, I've found 3 examples of anime that, if you're willing to do a bit of mental gymnastics, you could classify as a modern AMV, all having been released before YouTube's initial launch year of 2006. And I'd like to share them to you today in a desperate attempt to get more people in on this hobby of mine. Close your eyes and just visualize with me, alright? Imagine what an anime would look like if it were an OVA released in October of 1987, made by a Sony studio with an emphasis on mixed media short films and done entirely with pixel art as opposed to hand-drawn cell animation. Now open your eyes and disregard whatever you were thinking of, because what I'm about to show you is nowhere near what you're probably imagining. Let's talk about airplanes! The flying Luna Clipper is hard to describe, which is great because I want you to actually watch this stuff yourself rather than just having me narrate over every plot point like it's a podcast. When watching this for the first time, I kept thinking that the entire thing feels like it was made on a Commodore Amiga with a video toaster, and after doing some research, my presumption wasn't that far off. While the anime was made entirely on 8-bit MSX computers, it honestly felt like a bunch of members of the 8-bit demo scene came together to make a 51-minute art film. And to be honest, I'm really surprised I hadn't heard of it sooner. You'd think that the Vaporwave community would have taken the footage and just absolutely ran with it, but until I started researching anime for this video, I'd never heard of it before. But back to trying to, you know, talk about this. Of the many, many OVAs that I've seen, there's nothing that quite looks like the way that the Flying Luna Clipper does. Nor is there in the way of other OVAs that aim to do what TFLC does. TFLC can best be described as a showcase of mixed media, a combination of pixel art, music, and live-action footage all mixed into something, I'm sure. The titular Flying Luna Clipper is a restored airplane aiming to bring back the romantic period of early airflight, accomplished with a 200-inch screen playing all of these weird mixed media content that is the main reason why you're even here in the first place. And in regards to plot, that's essentially it. To be honest, going through with the rest of these OVAs that I show you, and just in the realm of obscure OVAs, period, this is kind of a trend you're going to have to accept as we go through it all. Going with these typical tropes, mindsets, and expectations that you'd have for any other media, or even just anime of the modern day, and you'd probably come out of the other side disappointed. You're going to have to try to keep an open mind to fully enjoy all of the wackiness here. Do you think I would have the media consumption habits of a sane person if I would go out of my way to knowingly watch this? Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. For those that are willing to make concessions like plot and logic, TFLC is here to leave you utterly dazzled and confused, and in my case, it accomplished both single-handedly. It's an easy recommendation for me if you're into something so avant-garde that you're not sure if the people making it even understand what it means. It's weird, it's confusing, looking at you, Gravity Dance, and there's nothing else like it. I give it a respectable rating of 7 dancing bananas out of 3 200-inch TVs. It truly is a product for the greatest streamers. So you know how there's like a bunch of people in the US and other Western cultures that are like absolutely obsessed with Japanese culture? Well, if you weren't aware, the opposite also exists. Japanese people that are obsessed with Western culture. You can find some funny stuff while trying to research this phenomena, just, you know, how we would fight over watching, like, I don't know, Serial Experiments Lane with the dub or the sub. Japanese people are fighting over King of the Hill and South Park with or without the dub, effectively the exact same things that we do. Naturally, this phenomena of being obsessed with Western culture has permeated itself in a lot of anime, with probably the biggest example being JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I mean, I don't even need to make my usual Pink Floyd references that are so obscured by clouds that nobody gets them but me. They already did the work for me. However, a much lesser known instance of this happening is the second OVA on this list, an OVA so obscure it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Let's talk about football. Imagine that you're about to die, right? But instead of going to heaven, you see this. Oh yeah, it's gonna be a good one, isn't it? Let's get the regular stuff out of the way because I know you're not here for it. Plot barely existent and poorly communicated. I've seen it like 3 times and I still don't really know what's going on. Something about like a football movie and identical twins and romance for some reason. Maybe this would make more sense if I actually read the manga like I was intending to, but whatever. It's not relevant and you're not here for that. The dub, barely present, and when it is,
super good.
You probably wish it wasn't. Or sometimes, fuck it, we don't even need a dub, just do what movies did from the 30s and just put text on a blank screen this one time in the whole thing. Visuals? Honestly, pretty good. It's exactly what you would expect from a late 80s OVA, and I mean, it's better than many OVAs I've had to sit through, that's for sure. But now that we've gotten the boring stuff out of the way, time for me to add Cam Sandwich to the YouTuber list of people that I'm ripping off, and let's talk about the whack crap. Out of the 3 AMVs that I'm going to be covering today, this is probably the most prominent example of what I would call a modern AMV. But done so long ago, it was released on fucking Laserdisc. Cipher the Video is a major reason for me making this video because I need more people to be aware that this even exists. On paper, it's an OVA adaptation of the manga of the same name, and that concept dies once you watch it. Before we even get to the title, we have shots of the Twin Towers, a performance by Phil Collins, and almost 0 diegetic dialogue. When I mean an AMV before YouTube, that's what I'm talking about. The experience of watching this OVA feels less like I'm watching an anime and more like a jukebox of just late 80s American pop music that someone put anime over. See? That prior segment about Japan being obsessed with Western culture did have its merits after all. All of this culminates at... Wait, why is the intro song playing again? So, yeah, the whole thing is actually about 24 minutes. But that's okay, it's not the entire story, because there's actually an extra 13 minutes of content with a special making of video that showcases a lot of details about production. And honestly, this is where the OVA really starts to shine. I'm a big fan of any form of media that outlines tackling the creation process, especially when those processes are super down to earth and amateurish. I mean, look at me. Granted, I actually spend time planning the technical knowledge of these videos. I mean, the avatar here is not in the footage, but to me, the informality of the creation process is something that I find really inspiring when it comes to me making my own content. Sometimes making something really can just be fun, and I'm glad to say that the making of video for Cipher the Video did not disappoint. So much information is covered in under 15 minutes. How the team temporarily moved to New York for a bit to capture the vibes of the city, photographs compared to animation stills, the emphasis on the Twin Towers, and probably most importantly, the intent for the entire OVA to be filmed like it's some piece of content you would find on MTV, where it's constantly jumping back and forth between musical numbers and interview footage sporadically. Whether or not that you think this goal was actually met is really just up to you. Either way, it's a really interesting piece in my OVA adventures that I hope you consider checking out. This OVA gets a very respectable rating of 2 twins out of 1 Footloose musical. And remember, use the strength of the other to stop it. Yes, this is it. If you've seen the Dark Age of Gorillas, which you should totally go watch, watch, you'll know that the video has 4 chapters, and that I use the Wii menu as a segue between each one, which has its own custom channel represented. It's the theming for the video, and I'm honestly really proud of how it turned out. However, there is a 5th Wii channel that was custom made for the video shoots that was just simply titled Around the World. A bit of background information about how I did that, by the way. I suck at art really badly, so instead of using Photoshop to manually recreate the Wii menu, all of this was done in emulator by modifying the banner data of a bunch of various WiiWare titles with my own custom titles, specifically of games that I remember seeing a lot on my friends' Wiis at the time. If you didn't get a nostalgia overdose by my choice to leave the original channel sounds in order, I picked Cave Story, Fluidity, Art of Balance, and World of Goo. However, in the Internet Archive dump where I got the source wads from, I saw this random shovelware title at the top of the list that was just simply titled Around the World. Seeing as I'm eternally online brain-rotted zoomer, I felt the irrefutable urge to make this low-quality joke that also doubled as foreshadowing towards a future video idea that I was planning at the time, and that planning is now about to pay off. You probably already know what's about to happen, but in case you don't, let's talk about a silent musical. And subsequently how to immediately get my video copyright claimed. Interstella 5555, the 5 Tori of the 5 Ecrit 5 Tar 5 Stum, is a collaboration between the professional French robots Daft Punk and legendary anime superstar Leiji Matsumoto. Judging from the art style alone, yeah, you can tell that this is definitely Leiji's work. Out of the 3 OVAs covered in this video, this is probably the one you're most likely to recognize, and definitely the one that makes the most out of actually having a soundtrack and an emphasis on said soundtrack. In fact, the whole thing was made around the album. Surprisingly, a lot of people that I've encountered and talked about while working on this project did not know that the music of this movie is just Discovery, an album that was released 2 years prior in 2001. I'm just gonna be blunt. Interstella kicks ass, and it's the easiest recommendation of the 3. It encouraged me to give Discovery, an album that I was initially very mixed towards, another shot. And now I own it. 2 of them. Just the idea of an officially commissioned AMV for an entire album is a really interesting concept, especially since using movies to aim as an audiovisual accompaniment to an album is something that's been done really rarely to my knowledge. Besides maybe The Who's Pinball Wizard and Pink Floyd's The Wall movie adaptation, there's nothing else really like it. Well, besides the second time Daft Punk would do this with electro— That was an anime. Well, besides the second time Daft Punk would do this with Tron Legacy— Okay, you know what? My prediction was honestly close enough. I'm just gonna take that. If you remember my community posts mentioning a silent musical, well, you found it. Interstella 5555 is a movie with no spoken dialogue, no written dialogue. Hell, besides some sound effects, it doesn't introduce any audio of its own at all. And yet, the biggest draw of it is the music itself. So, the silent musical. That's why I call it that. I highly encourage checking it out, and maybe bringing some friends along for the ride as I have done with my own friends. There's a lot more to the story behind Interstella, including a big reason of it even getting made in the first place is just that Daft Punk were just both fans of Leiji's work as kids. But it's getting around time to wrap up this video as it stands. I give this OVA an incredibly respectable rating of 5,555 out of how many cultists died in that one scene while Short Circuit was playing. With all that we've talked about today, we really haven't even begun to scratch the surface of music-focused OVAs, or even just generally quirky and obscure OVAs for that fact. There's plenty more information about these OVAs that didn't include on purpose. The aim of these videos isn't necessarily to be a 5-hour retrospective going over every single plot point, giving you every single fact, all of this bullshit. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to give you little bite-sized doses of things that I find interesting to maybe make you, the person watching this, interested in it as well. Potentially enough to go out and do some of your own research. Watch the anime yourself. If I had just been a passive viewer watching Hazel's videos about her experiences with OVAs, I don't think that I would have the appreciation for the hobby I would have now. Nor would I be here making this YouTube video to tell you about it. So please, if I've done a good job with this video, and if you're interested in anything that I've talked about here, please consider checking out websites like the Internet Archive or my anime list. Go out of your way to do the research, to watch the anime yourself, because I promise you, it is going to be a much more engaging experience than just having a 5-hour retrospective on in the background while you do other things. Speaking from experience. If this video has encouraged you to give obscure OVAs a try and to go out and explore this niche hobby, then my work here is done. So, with all that being said, thank you for all of you, and I'll see you next time. Why is the video still going? Paul, why is the video still going? Paul?